Today's episode is brought to you by NordPass, an easy-to-use yet advanced password manager that makes online activities easier and safer. With NordPass, you won't find business account passwords in notebooks or shared files, and you won't need to find a physical company's credit card to share its details with your colleague. That's because NordPass allows all team members to store, manage, and share credentials and other sensitive data securely and conveniently. Beyond that, NordPass quickly identifies weak passwords, monitors data breaches, and gives you full control over who has access to company resources. And check this out. You can now get the NordPass Teams or Business Plan with 30% off. Just go to nordpass.com and use the code Swisspreneur at checkout. Don't miss out on this opportunity. Again, that's nordpass.com, code Swisspreneur.
In the last 8 years, there were something like 24 billion unique set of credentials dumped into the dark web.
Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. If you enjoy listening to our show, make sure to follow the podcast and leave a rating. And now, here's your host, Silvan.
Karolis, a very well welcome to the Swisspreneur Show. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you, Silvan. Pleasure is mine.
You are the head of product and business development at NordPass, part of Security. Before we talk about cybersecurity, one of our core topics today, I want to go back a bit in time and look at your CV. There are two things that stick out in your past. First one, you were passionate about social volunteering and also about exploring different countries. Why was that? What is sort of the link and the combination here?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So ever since I joined university, I thought of how to max out my time while I was there. So after studies, I thought I need to join as many as possible social volunteering organizations because of doing some good deeds for society, as well as finding some new friends, new connections, and new contacts. Interesting fact that even now I'm in touch with some of those people from back in time who we volunteered together. And there are actually interesting facts scattered around the world to this date. And then exploring different countries and traveling around the world. Yeah, I think I've covered something like 25% maybe of the countries around the globe. I think it was very natural, almost childish curiosity to see how other countries live, how do they go around, almost if you would imagine a video game where you uncover map when you progress further. And I thought it's really interesting to learn and to get different perspectives from people from different countries.
Amazing. And countries were not the only things that you discovered. You also worked in all different sorts of companies before you joined NordPass, from pharma to banks to L'Oreal in the cosmetics industry. What got you interested then in cybersecurity after you have seen the world and also different companies around the globe?
Yeah, that's very interesting perspective. So when you put two extreme data points, like first company that I worked at, L'Oreal, which is French cosmetics, and then Security, which is cybersecurity, it's very extreme, very radical difference. But I think that evolution or transformation was gradual over the time. Ever since I was interested in product management, so was always working with the product. Just over time, with the, evolution of the world trends as well, moved closer towards SaaS business. And before joining cybersecurity, I was in fintech for a couple of years where we've been building investment platform actually out of the Lithuania for Scandinavian and Luxembourg markets. So again, very global approach. But fintech is kind of highly regulated already, a lot of compliance and a lot of cybersecurity topics there. So basically in one of the events where I was talking and sharing some best practices, I was approached by one of the co-founders of Security with offered to have a conversation over a coffee, discuss cybersecurity. And then I thought, maybe that would be a very interesting next step, which wasn't at that point too radical because I touched upon a bit of cybersecurity, even though maybe a little bit scary because that was cybersecurity focused. but still already had some fragments of the cybersecurity knowledge.
So it felt more like a natural transition than it might seem from the outside for you in that sense.
Yeah, exactly. I think when you looked into the experiences and made a summary, it sounds very radical change. But yeah, I think deep inside me, it was more of the natural and gradual, not that radical at the end of the day.
Great. And cybersecurity is also the first topic that we want to talk a bit in more depth together today. You said basically when we were preparing the interview, cybersecurity solutions should be your number one, your top priority as a startup. And I just wonder, really? Even before product or market, isn't that more important as a startup to find the best market or the best product first?
Yeah, I know it may sound very extreme, especially when we have this widespread notion that cybersecurity is for very big, rich, well advanced in the market companies who then enter the new level of the problems, and many other bad actors maybe try to hack them. And there are a lot of complex cybersecurity tools that these companies deploy to protect against. So that is a general perception. But in reality, cybersecurity is a topic for everyone, and any company can fall victim for the cyber attack. It could be one-man shop, it could be micro company, it could be small company, mid-sized company, large company, whatever. Anyone can be victim of the cybersecurity attack. Hence, everyone should care for the cybersecurity, and hence the startups should think about that from the get-go. So, just maybe the idea is that in the landscape of cybersecurity, there are different toolings. That's true. There are some complex products, but also there are products that being built in the cybersecurity domain with the small companies, startups in mind, and are shaped for them to cover most hygienic parts of the cybersecurity and to be easy to deploy as well as to use. So in my thinking, why it is important to start thinking about cybersecurity before even product being live in the market. Because when you create startup, and even if you don't have a product yet, but you start some operations as a company. So meaning you open maybe email, maybe you decide to build a digital product. So you order some cloud-based solution, you order some tools where you put some information. You basically create some digital assets that are valuable for yourself and you want to protect them. And still to date, usually we protect them with the passwords. So password is usually 80% of the data breaches happen because of the misuse of the passwords one way or another. And final point here is that attack can happen already in that stage when you have a startup and start operating, even though if you don't have product yet. And when data breach happens, it can be exploited only later, and in some cases could be exploited some 2 or 3 years later. And for startup, 2 or 3 years is a very long time. After 2 years, you could be a very successful company, and it could hammer you from the back. And this hammer could be really painful when you are operating, everything is going fine, and then, oh my goodness, I had a breach 2 years ago when I didn't even have a product live. So in my perspective, you should at least start thinking and embedding. How do I protect information that I've already started gathering and storing?
Makes a lot of sense. Now that you added a bit more context to it, I fully see that especially as a tech startup, that is just so crucial for you to protect. And I wonder, there are also some myths out there. What would you say are the 2 or 3 biggest myths that startups have regarding cybersecurity? Because as you just described, it's crucial, but still, I feel many startups think, oh, I can do that later. So what are the biggest myths that you see with startups in regards to cybersecurity?
Right. And I think very well noticed, still most of the startups would think that the cybersecurity is milestone far away and would just ignore that element. So the myths are that startups would think, hey, we are not really interesting. We are too small. We are not relevant. We're not generating revenue. No one would really target us. The reality is that the vast majority of cyber attacks are not targeted. They are widespread, and they're not really targeting particular companies. Usually you just get into the spectrum of the attack, whichever attack vector they choose, but usually you just one of many of companies that attacker is trying to attack. So essentially everyone can fall victim there. Another great myth is that it's, of course, complicated and expensive. I can see where that is coming from. But as mentioned a little bit before, In this modern landscape, there are cybersecurity tools which are very easy to use and sometimes almost free. They're usually cybersecurity tools are not free, but they could be very cheap, and early startups could afford that for sure, and they could save the fortune later. So I think those would be the main things that startups face in terms of thinking about cybersecurity.
Makes sense. And let's also talk about how data breaches happen. You said before about 80% is coming from weak passwords. So having a too easy to guess or too easy to brute force password is probably one of the biggest reasons why data breaches happen. What are the other sources how data breaches happen, and who are sort of the usual suspects in that sense?
Yeah, so data breach could happen in different ways. Predominant way is actually passwords taken from the dark web. In the last 8 years, there were something like 24 billion unique set of credentials dumped into the dark web. And the single text file currently circulating in the forums called the RockU 2024 contains almost 10 billion of the passwords. So you can take up a lot of passwords from there and try different attacks. But of course, there are a lot of vectors. You can do phishing. You can embed the special ransomware. There's so-called info stealers as a ransomware tools, which then extract passwords from the browsers, for example. And things like that. There are different elements on how these breaches can be orchestrated. Actually, one more interesting thing, like we live in ecosystem of startups. There is some sort of ecosystem or underworld ecosystem you can call. There is such a term called ransomware as a service. So there are tools produced for bad actors to be used in order to orchestrate attacks, and meaning that the entry barrier for a cyber criminal is lower now because there's so many production that you can reuse for trying to organize attacks.
And I wonder, with everything you just mentioned, how is the market reacting? We see things like two-factor authentication. We see login links being sent to your email for an additional security layer. Why are they not enough to stop the things that you just described?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting topic. I think that bigger companies react. Of course, the companies and startups who produce cybersecurity, they react. But the market on general terms, like people and employees, and many companies as well outside the spectrum of the ones who are prudent, are still sometimes ignoring these facts and even don't put these particular measures that you mentioned in place. Second factor is a great addition. I think it must be embedded in every place where you store sensitive and not unsensitive information. Usually people just are lazy to do second factor, but essentially it helps a lot. It depends how you set up the second factor as well, but that helps. In my simple understanding, password managers would be the sort of a bingo element of the game because they support the whole ecosystem around the password. So from the password generator, it automatically generates strong, complex, unique passwords that you store in secure encrypted way and then autofill them. Then you can add the second factor and in a way store it together in a vault as well. In our case, you store it with the special biometric because it's technically not very safe to store password and second factor in the same place, but you can store it with the extra security layer. And you embed everything in one platform, and in that way secure everything around that password. We feel as a NordPass, as one of the cybersecurity vendors, that awareness is growing as such in general. The trend is getting better in terms of the adoption of the password management. But outside people who adopt password manager, the practices are quite bad.
I can imagine. So in that sense, I also wonder, how is the NordPass service superior? You mentioned password manager is sort of the whole ecosystem or platform. That's exactly what you are with NordPass. So please tell me a bit more about how your service is superior in that sense, and also how you with NordPass contribute to hopefully a higher level of cybersecurity out there in the world.
When you, as an employee or startup founder, get a tool that can provide the whole ecosystem around password from A to Z, from setting a strong password to actually authenticating and protecting it with extra layers. Or actually even, so we support passkeys now. I'm not sure how many people have heard or are using passkeys, but that's a very efficient, phishing-resistant new technology, which over time is expected to eliminate passwords. That's because that is a more secure way. So these things are available in the NordPass and help to increase security posture. And regarding how do we as a password manager contribute to, for example, B2B landscape, so on general terms, the company, the startup, is more secure when more of its employees are using the password manager and actually following the practices. Hence, what we are trying to do is to build the software which enables people for that with almost no effort, meaning that the product has to be very simple to use, intuitive, in a sense, even fun to use, because you generate autofill and everything goes smoothly. So the more people are actively adopting password manager in your company, the better cybersecurity posture of your company is. So yeah, that's how we understand it, and that's how we try to contribute with the cybersecurity topic.
Amazing. And another very important part is NordPass, there's still a company behind it, right? So for me as a consumer, as a potential customer, it's also very important to be able to track and understand the track record, the reputation of a cybersecurity company. How can one do that to ensure that, hey, I'm in good hands with this password manager or this cybersecurity company?
Right. So I think there is no single source for checking credibility of every single provider around the world. So you need to do a little bit of the homework yourself. And what I think, in my opinion, is important is how well the provider is audited. If the provider is serious and prudent about the service, usually they have certifications. So, for example, NordPass holds ISO 27001. SOC 2 Type 2. We are GDPR compliant, HIPAA compliant. From the day one in product development, we embed definition of done rules where internal pen test is a requirement for any release, basically. And before release of the product and at constant cadence, we do external pen testing, and then there are reports from the outside third parties provided on how product stands in terms of the cybersecurity and penetratability. So I would recommend to look out for these sort of verifications. You can always get in touch with the account managers or customer support and actually ask for proof of these documentation and things like that. I would always encourage to do such homeworks before selecting the cybersecurity vendor.
Yeah, that's for sure a great tip. And often these certifications are also closely linked to the compliance department in that sense. So to close the loop with the intro question, let's say I have a new startup. I just say, well, cybersecurity, I heard about it, but I just don't focus on it. I say I have other things to do. How long does it take until then compliance, either from my customers or maybe even at one point even of my own company, will knock on my door to shut me down or to ask me a few uncomfortable questions? What is sort of, how long can I go without really taking this seriously enough?
Right. It's very difficult to answer, definitely, this question. And maybe it depends a little bit of the market or industry that you are in. If you are in fintech, which is heavily regulated, or medical sphere, I think it's difficult to move startup forward without some compliance checkpoints. But if you're an other startup, perhaps it's very diverse. It could be very random, from immediately from to maybe very late. And maybe if someone comes knocking in a door, maybe something is from regulatory once breach happens and once you lost customer data, for example. But I think that sometimes we tend to demonize or ignore compliance, but compliance can contribute with the commercial beneficial elements. For example, so for us, if we have these certificates done, there is a proof to ourselves that everything is fine, but also there is a proof to our potential shopper and customer that, hey, these guys are compliant, they have certificates, so I trust them and I want to go with them. And this is, and sometimes it's crucial selling point in B2B landscape. And Sometimes even, if you are in a business where you think that compliance maybe is not much needed, having compliance on top for your own sake can help you commercially, because it will also function as a social verification that, hey, we can trust these guys.
Definitely. I think that's a very good message, that compliance is not your enemy, but actually your friend in the long term, to help you eventually grow even faster and bigger than you eventually would without compliance. I have one last question. When we did sort of a bit of small talk at the beginning before hitting the record button, you mentioned that the US is also a very important market for you. You yourself are based in Lithuania, in Europe. So I just wonder, for building a cybersecurity company as you do, is Europe a good place to call home and to, set up your operations? Or is it, as with many technology companies, the US is where the real game happens?
I think that, in my personal observation, there are a lot of successful cybersecurity companies in United States. There's really a huge amount of great examples there. A lot of companies emerge from Israel as well. We noticed that there's a big cybersecurity know-how around Eastern Europe and Central Europe as well. And Europe itself, including like European Union and Switzerland, I think it's very favorable place for thinking about cybersecurity, data protection, internet privacy, because we have strong government or supra-government, I think they're called, the bodies that imply some of the rules. They do regulation, and we have in Europe, we have more prudent and strict regulations that we have to adhere to, which means we need to go extra miles in these areas. So I think in that sense, Europe is in sort of a favorable position in terms of how we are prepared and how we understand the data protection and internet privacy, so we can really move a dent on the global scale. I think it's interesting that, Lithuania and Switzerland, for example, are relatively small markets. So when you build a startup company, you would like to expand your markets, not only sell domestically, but also globally. And I actually know myself numerous of great examples of cybersecurity companies from both of these countries. So I think there is a good track record, that people in these countries know how to do cybersecurity and are capable to compete on a high level on a global scene. So I think it's really great.
In that sense, a good place to have your operations, to build your company out of a smaller country in Europe. I love that. Now, I also want to talk about a second core topic. Many people have seen NordPass or even used it themselves, and you guys have an outstanding track record, in my perspective, for developing a top quality software and also releasing new features at a rapid speed. So I also want to talk and really learn from you about your product development process. Can you walk us through your product development process? How do you actually build product at NordPass?
Right. So I've joined the NordPass at the very beginning, and I was responsible for creating a NordPass business product and the whole department, you can say. And from my judgment, it has evolved the way we build product. At the beginning, we did more of the Kanban. I myself did a lot of hands-on research, wireframing, working with the security engineers, technology people. And then we would just create a backlog and distribute to some of the core teams. But over time, as you mentioned, we grew very fast. Market accepted as well. So we needed to expand in terms of the operation teams and people. So we grew super fast, was crazy time. And then we realized that, well, at least for us, that model did not work anymore. So we reorganized into more of the teams. So we have numerous of teams. They are mission for particular missions. They are fully cross-functional. So meaning every team is staffed to the full capacity to run their operation. There are different ways how we distinct what team is mission for, but those are the details. They run in a synchronized rhythm. We use Scrum now. So we turn to, well, I would say almost full Scrum model. And, I don't know myself what is the best model. So every time we measure, observe, and think when we need to maybe change something. I think it very much relates to how fast you grow as a company. And you need to think if the current model, the way you work with, is the best on where you are now in terms of the market. So yeah, always being alert and trying to adjust on the go.
That makes a ton of sense. It's not set in stone. It's work in progress in that sense. Another area that is also work in progress is often sort of the negotiations between the CPO, the Chief Product Officer, and the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer. Some people use them as synonyms, but from my perspective and experience, they have very different functions and key responsibilities. How do you define these two roles? What does the CPO do and what does the CTO do at NordPass?
Right. So I would see great dangers in actually unifying the role under one umbrella. For sake of the simplification, we say that CPO basically defines what we have to build, which direction we want to go. CTO could challenge that, but essentially CTO helps on the best approach from technological point of view, because there could be at least couple paths, at least also in cybersecurity in particular, you always, in any sort of cybersecurity company, you have to think on how do you make a convenient product or secure product. And you have to find the best balance. That's what we try to do at the NordPass. So we want to adhere to the best cybersecurity standards, actually. So we go to the extremes, but we never want to victimize the user experience. So there's always this conversation in between two of the people, how to do that. And I think that, Chief Product Officer should be closer to the market, should be closer to the users, understand the pulse of the market, the needs, and maybe changes in trends. And CTO basically should help to deliver these findings. And I know practices for sure where, for example, CTO covers it all, but I just fear that in that way, companies lose maybe aggressiveness in the market because they become too much technology oriented, but you cannot lose pace in a market. You have to be always alert. So I like this question. And I think at least in what we do, we distinct these roles. We have clearly defined definitions on how they have to operate. And I think it works for us.
I love that. And I can see that as a user myself, that it's working. That's fantastic to see. In that sense, you also have the tough decision sometimes, right? Between what the customers ask you for, what the users want you to build, and your own product convictions, where you say, I know where the product has to go. We built this now, and the users will eventually love it, but they just don't see it yet. How do you balance these two sort of sometimes very different approaches on building the product, because they can be very contradictory in that sense?
Yes. So we are a very customer-centric company. So we like to listen a lot to our customers. You can say maybe we are a bit less of a Steve Jobs at the moment, because we maybe put our contradictions in a second place. You could say like that. So we have very quantitative, smart ways on how we work with our B2B customers, but on quantitative scale, where we record a lot of feedback and requests in our CRM, and then we have a special automated funnels for CRM, which create a heat maps of the features. And then we have a kind of really calculative way on, so if we want to fast forward with the, let's say growth of the billings, the business growth. So we need to deliver these particular features because they would impact a lot the pipeline. So partly our growth pace was crazy, and it's still crazy because for now we try to catch up with market. Essentially, we want to be number one, but we also are the newest, the youngest kid around the block. So we want to be smart about that. So for now, we just want to close these gaps as soon as possible. In many ways, actually, we are doing it even better because we build the old features with the new approach, which is now nicer to use. So yeah, for now, we innovate for sure. We have, we build a couple of examples, TOTP solution embedded into the vault, which requires biometrics. It's a long story. Let's not go into detail. But for example, it's unique in the market. No one else does it like that. It's very complex from a technical point of view, but we decided to go that way because that's something extra. We believe that's a long-term shot that maybe in the future, everyone will follow that. We hold at least multiple patents for that on a feature. So we do these things, but I think emphasis now on consumer.
Yeah, I love that. That's a bit unexpected. I thought you would have sort of a balance, but it's great to hear that you really emphasize on the customer feedback and the needs. Along this process, the whole product development process, what are sort of the key tools that you use to make it a success? I know you talked about heat maps, you talked about using Scrum, so I'm sure you have some tools in place that make the product, but also the development process easier or at least seamless in that sense.
Yeah, so we experiment with a lot of different tools. Actually, it could be maybe nearly 100. Of course, maybe the ones that we use on daily basis is less of the amount, but I think those are casual product development tools. And as a cybersecurity company, we try to avoid publicly and openly naming the tools itself. So, but I'm kind of can assure you that there are no secret tools that we use and make a real difference. It's all about people how they use the tools.
Yeah, no magic bullet in the tooling sense.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk also about the future. And I think you, as the head of product, are the perfect person to answer this. What is next in store for NordPass? What are some milestones or also some new features that you're working on that we can expect from you in the near future?
Yeah. So, for example, PCMag now ranks NordPass as best password manager in the world from all of the consumer side. G2 marks NordPass as one of the best password managers for small businesses up to 50 employees. So we feel that, okay, we have unlocked some of the great milestones here and where we head next. So our next stop, we want to grow bigger. We want to be able to facilitate larger customers. We do facilitate larger customers, but we want to facilitate that to even greater extent. So there is going to be a lot of granularity in our product, a lot of I think even groundbreaking features on how you can organize passwords as an organization and how you can observe them. That's going to be really interesting. Also, we are big betting. We have just launched a standalone product, which is called Authopia by the NordPass. And that is for passkeys implementations. Say if you have a startup where you build for consumers and you want to enable your consumers to have not only password protected accounts, but you want to have them a passkey protected account. So we would use a simple out of the box solution, which you just embed in your e-commerce or whatever, and then you offer passkeys to your customers. So passkeys is going to be a very interesting topic for us ahead. So we will see how Authopia will do, but we are very excited about that.
Amazing. I love it. A lot of new stuff coming from your toolbox in that sense. Now, to wrap up the conversation today, I would also like to ask you a few rapid fire questions. I give you either different options to choose from or a simple question, and you have to answer in one sentence maximum. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
What is the most used app on your phone right now?
Well, that's easy, NordPass, because it gives access to the other apps.
Every day, multiple times. What's one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self?
Yeah, I think it relates with the beginning of our conversation. I would enroll myself to building SaaS products earlier at my age. I think that's a good path.
I like that. And what is the best business advice that you have ever received?
Don't chase money, solve real problems.
Yeah, spot on. Are you more of a morning person or a night owl?
A little bit of the both. By nature, I like night more, but life made me a morning person as well. And I see a lot of value in that actually. Now I like it very much.
A forced morning person by life, so to speak. I like that.
Yeah, but not a bad forcing.
Okay, it's a good forcing in that sense. What is one thing that you cannot work without?
Again, I would say NordPass, but would be too cheesy. So my real remedy is double espresso. And if I have it in the morning, then the day is set for me.
Nice. And the last question for you today, what is your favorite way to unwind after a long day of work?
Yeah, for that, I would like easy run or easy cycle.
Great. Karolis, thank you so much for coming on the show and for letting us take a look into the product development process and cybersecurity as an important topic. Lots of success and all the best for the future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Silvan. It was a pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, you can support us by rating our show on Apple Podcasts. This way, we can reach an ever-growing number of aspiring entrepreneurs.